So I've talked about interfacing for bag making in the past, but I haven't necessarily covered stabilizers for machine embroidery. Basically the same concept. You want to strengthen the fabric so that you can embroider the crap out of it and not have it fall apart, because that's a lot of stabbing. Oddly therapeutic. So in this video I'm going to go over 3 of the core types of embroidery stabilizers that you'll encounter. Cutaway, Terway, and water-soluble. It's not going to be a comprehensive list because then this video would be an hour long. I'll also go over additional tools that help stabilize fabrics while embroidering them, as well as concrete examples of what stabilizers, how much, and when to use them. First up, we have Cutaway Stabilizer. Cutaway comes in light, medium, and heavy weights. This happens to be a medium weight cutaway. It cannot be ripped away. As the name implies, it has to be cut away from the product you've embroidered it to, which means it's staying there once it's stitched down. But the stitches in your design are going to be extremely stable, unlike my brain. Typically, you're going to use Cutaway Stabilizer whenever something is going to be washed repeatedly or worn, like t-shirts, sweatshirts, baby onesies, jeans. You get the idea. Some people say worn but not torn. Now this is a more traditional style of a cutaway stabilizer. It's very thick, very stiff, and oftentimes will leave an impression on the garment being worn, especially if it's a thin one. It's notoriously bad for t-shirts. That's why there is now a no-show mesh option. Look at how drapey it is. Ooh. It's a lot lighter than the other one that I showed you that's a medium weight and more traditional style of cutaway. But it's still really sturdy and it'll keep your stitches from going all wonky. Also, because of the drape, it's not this really stiff thing that's gonna leave an impression on your shirts. In fact, this stuff reminds me of those sweatshirts from the 90s that my grandma used to make that had the kittens ironed onto them. Does anybody else remember those, or am I just dating myself here? Well, let's be honest, the menopause buddy fan over there is probably the thing that's dating me the most in this video. Usually if I'm doing something like a t-shirt or a lightweight sweatshirt, jacket, etc., I'll use the cutaway mesh, but I pair it with something a little stronger that can be removed. Which leads me right into Terway Stabilizers. Terway Stabilizers are basically temporary stabilizers that get perforated from all of the stabbing action and get ripped away in the end. The only part of the Terway Stabilizer that remains is whatever got stuck under all the stitching. So your stitches will remain stable, but the fabric around it probably won't. I tend to use Terway Stabilizer on something like hats or backpacks. Also, towels are really big time to use something like this. Essentially, if you don't want the stabilizer to be visible on the final product, you want to use something like Terway. It is exactly as the name implies. Yes, it's like ripping up a contract. It also comes in lightweight, medium, and heavyweight varieties. And what I was alluding to when it came to the no-show cutaway mesh and using something like the Terway Stabilizer is that you can actually use the Terway and the cutaway to basically give your hoop and the product that you're embroidering a little more stabilization while it's being stitched, but not necessarily something that sticks around forever. I'll go over the machine embroidery sandwich in a little bit. The third core type of machine embroidery stabilizers is water soluble. It's a funky cellophane-like material. Looks like I've been shedding. You basically use this stuff on your top layer when you're doing machine embroidery, specifically with plush fabrics where the thread might sink down into it. Bath towels, sweatshirts, sweaters. I even use it on t-shirts. Minky for blankets. It just gives you that added protective layer on the top of whatever it is that you're embroidering, so you don't have to worry about fishing out all of the stitching later. When you're done with your embroidery and you're cleaning everything up, you can rip away some of the larger pieces and then just use water to basically dissolve it away. That's one of the reasons why I keep a little spray bottle around my embroidery station and the workshop. It does come in thicker varieties. This is actually water soluble, but it's more fabric-like. This is great if you want to make patches, or if you want to do freestanding lace. It's a lot sturdier, so it's not going to fall apart once it's hooped and stabbed a million times. Whereas this stuff is going to stretch and rip. I'm just not ripping it on here because I kind of need it for the video. Now let's talk about a couple of useful tools when it comes to stabilizing your products before you embroider them. The first thing is basting spray. I know that a lot of quilters have a love-hate relationship with this stuff, but when it comes to embroidery, it's pretty important. There do exist some cutaway fusible stabilizers that are fairly lightweight that you can basically fuse into place with an iron or a heat press. You put it on the wrong side of whatever it is you're going to be embroidering. The problem is sometimes you don't have the best of alignment. So you have to compensate by creating an area that's been interfaced that's slightly larger than your design. Going back to the whole like grandma's sweatshirt thing, you might be able to actually see the shape of the interfaced area from the front side, especially if you're doing something like embroidering to a thinner t-shirt or jacket. So what you can actually do with this basting spray is baste together several layers of stabilizers to basically build up that framework for what is going to support the stitching while being hooped. But you can also use it to spray around the top of everything that's been hooped before you put down the product. Then the product isn't gonna slide all over the place. Take for example that t-shirt. I do a layer of no-show mesh and Terway stabilizers. And then on top of all of that, I put the actual t-shirt and one tiny layer of water-soluble stabilizer. So imagine, if you will, I am a needle and I'm jabbing the mess out of all of this in a hoop at very high speeds. Let's just say Father Earth is angry. It's basically like tectonic plates. They're gonna be rubbing against each other like this and all out of place. So that's why you use the basting spray. It just makes sure that everything stays in place for the duration of the embroidery exercise. Now, the last tool that I suggest for stabilizing is actually something you do after you embroider. When you use cutaway stabilizers, sometimes when you cut it away, it's just not the most comfortable thing against your skin. Take, for example, a baby onesie that's been embroidered. It's a garment that's going to get washed a lot. So of course it's going to use a cutaway stabilizer. But that edge is going to be pretty rough on a baby's skin. They're sensitive little things. So what I like to do is actually cut out a little bit of this knit tricot that's fusible and fuse it down on the underside of the garment, but on top and surrounding all of the embroidered area. And it's a lot softer than cutaway stabilizer. The only downside to it is you have to make sure that you press with a lot of heat and evenly, otherwise it'll start peeling away from the corners whenever it's washed. That unfortunately was a hard lesson I had to learn. So we've talked about the 3 core types of stabilizers: cutaway, tearaway, and water soluble. But how do you know when to apply those? What combinations, etc., etc.? A lot of this is going to depend on the density of the design as well as the stitching angles in your design. It'll heavily depend upon what kind of garment or item you're embroidering to as well. For example, hats are worn, but I don't use cutaway with hats. I actually use tearaway. So let's go through some concrete examples. For t-shirts, I like to create a machine embroidery sandwich. I start with 1 layer of tearaway stabilizer followed by a layer of cutaway no-show mesh. The underside of the t-shirt goes on top of the no-show. Then I add a layer of water-soluble stabilizer. Everything except for the water-soluble stabilizer has been spray basted together. That keeps everything from shifting while it's being stitched out. The tearaway is simply there to keep everything stabilized while it's in the hoop and being embroidered. The water-soluble topper keeps the threads from sinking into the knit fabric of the shirt. For a typical bath towel, I'll use 2 layers of a medium tearaway with the water-soluble layer on top. Even though towels are washed quite frequently, tend to use dense designs with knockdown stitches that keep some of the stabilizer in place even after the excess has been torn away. Towel embroidery is more decorative than it is useful, but they do tend to be very dense designs like satin stitches. The important thing is not to use a cutaway because you just don't want that fringy edge hanging off from the backside. Now when it comes to backpacks, there are a lot of people who will say you can get away with a layer of tearaway stabilizer. I'm not one of those people. A lot of this highly depends on where it is you're going to be putting that embroidery design. If it's a really well-used area like a front pocket or a top flap, you probably want to use a layer of medium cutaway. That's because that area is going to get a lot of abuse. Sweaters and beanies kind of fall under the same category as t-shirts. I use the exact same sandwich technique for sweaters and beanies as I do the t-shirts. Even though sweaters and beanies will be thicker than a t-shirt, sweaters have a lot more drape and beanies tend to get stretched into oblivion. So to review that sandwich, it's basically a layer of tearaway followed by a layer of no-show mesh, the garment, and then all topped with water-soluble stabilizer. And again, everything in this lovely sandwich has been spray basted together with the exception of the water-soluble. You can actually spray baste water-soluble to the top, but I just don't recommend it because then it's really hard to get off of there later. And personally for me, if I'm doing like 100 beanies, I don't want to have to like basically wash 100 beanies after the fact just to get rid of that water-soluble topper. So that's it. Now you understand stabilizers for embroidery a little better. Bear in mind that the way that I do things isn't the way that everybody else does things. You should always test with your own products to make sure that you have the right combination that fits for you and your designs. I only gave examples of typical machine embroidery scenarios. As we all know, there's more than one way to crack an egg. Cook an egg? Cook. It's cook. Why am I always like murdery? If you feel like sharing what you prefer to do in the comments below, please feel free. I would love to hear from you. And others could learn from you as well. And to provide a little extra help with your shopping needs, I'll put links to the products that I use in the section below the video. Thank you so much. Feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel for more things just like this, or laser stuff for reasons.